Hi, my name is Associate Professor Mark Ryan. I was an AFI Research Collection Fellow in 2018. My Unpacked video today will look at the collection's press clipping files, and I'll talk about how I use them for my own research, but why they're so important for other film and TV scholars. So my research project proposed to develop a detailed, in-depth history of Australian horror cinema, and to untangle the different aesthetic strands that make up this history. So while there's been a number of published histories on Australian horror, most of them are either short or very broad brush overviews of the subject. As a result, we don't really have a detailed history of all the different strands and types that make up Australian horror cinema. Many of these histories conflate terms such as Australian Gothic, horror, and exploitation. A film like Wolf Creek, for example, is variously labelled all of these terms. However, what distinguishes between a more regular horror film, a film that might be more exploitative, or a film that may be more gothic in its tone is unclear. My project proposed to unpack and create a very detailed history of the different types of horror films and the aesthetic tendencies that make up this history. So for many films made today, there's vast collections of reviews and critical writings available online. For Australian movies released before the 2000s, it's much harder to find a very comprehensive range of reviews for these films. In some cases, obscure magazines and newspapers no longer exist, and in some cases they may have been lost. The AFI has a very comprehensive collection of press clipping files for every Australian movie ever made. These press clippings contain much more than just newspaper articles. They collect and contain excellent range of newspaper articles from significant news media outlets, but they also contain producer notes, director notes, other critical writings, and paratextual material. So my research aimed to investigate every Australian horror film released from the beginning of cinema in the early 1900s all the way up until 1999 in terms of their press clippings. So in the end, I ended up with a very rich and large amount of data that I could use to create a very comprehensive history of Australian horror cinema. So the research found that the aesthetics of Australian horror movies are cyclical, that there are indeed a number of very distinct types and subgenres that make up Australian horror cinema, and that many of the thematic concerns established in the 70s and 80s remain foundational for contemporary Australian horror films. The outcomes of this research resulted in a book chapter that has been published in the 2021 collection Australian Genre Cinema. In conclusion, the AFI research collection and their press clipping files are an amazing resource for Australian film and TV scholars. They allow you to develop very specific, detailed research into specific films, genres, periods of history, filmmakers, policy, settings, and so on. That is my AFI Unpacked. Enjoy.